Now, real quick, I know most people come here to see some updates on Bad Grandpa. I will get back on that. I figured it'd be more exciting to show some work on the GXP. Not a lot of people have posted about pulling the engines out of these things, maybe one or two folks on the garage floor by hand. So you can see my old turbo there. I'm doing some basic work on it for maintenance right now, but I really am considering replacing that downpipe, replacing the stock catback. Here you can see the whole setup all together. As soon as it gets to the downpipe, the choking begins. One quick note, if you need to reconnect your battery while all of this stuff is disconnected and you're kind of concerned that something might short, well, I've got the entire hot wire harness that goes from the positive side of the battery all the way over to the starter removed, which then goes from the starter and runs from there to the alternator on that large wire through the main engine harness. But I've got it removed. I actually taped it off just in case it wants to touch that ground, which also goes near the starter, when this is running down along the radiator to go over there and meet it. But all I had to do was connect this chassis ground and connected it to the fuse box. That way I could take my fob and open the trunk. I was able to put the key in. I actually removed the fuel pump fuse, so that way when I keyed on the car, there was no risk of spraying fuel out of the line that I have out of the way right now. So just a little safety note, just make sure you are aware of everything that power could be conducted to, especially from the positive wires. So right now, the only positive wires connected are going to the fuse box and to a taped off wire on the ground, and the negative wires you need connected back to the battery are going to the chassis right there. Make sure that's clean. For now, I've got that done. I'm actually going to disconnect it, starting with the ground, and then I can set this car on the ground. I've got the front wheels on temporarily before I lift everything back up and disconnect the ball joints again, so that I can pull the cradle out, pull the engine off the cradle, put the cradle back in, and it can sit out in the driveway for a little while we go through this engine and transmission swap. All right, we're back on the ground. I'm gonna go grab some food, and then it's time. I'm gonna set you up over on that fridge with the GoPro and do a time lapse of me rolling this thing back, lifting it up, and letting the cradle come out. So it's going to be a little bit of jockeying because I do have to disconnect the ball joints again and disconnect the steering rack and all that while I temporarily have it kind of sitting halfway out of the garage so that the engine hoist can hold the front end up until I set it on some stands, and then I can pull the cradle out of the way and then pull the engine off the cradle, put the cradle back in the car, roll the car out to park for a little while I work on the engine, and then do all of this in reverse. Despite how awesome these things are, they are a massive pain in the butt, and props to the handful of folks out there that are doing extensive work on these, because I don't know how you want to do it more than one time unless you are doing a lot of engine bay cleanup and clear out like we do on the 3800. Let's grab a snack. I'm going to close up the garage for a little while, go enjoy lunch, and then on with the fun. But for you, that's coming up right now. All right, and now I've got the engine ready to be separated from the transmission. Just gonna get in here with my tire mounting tool here. So now that's separated. Gonna lift the engine up a little bit. Once you can see all the way around the flywheel, you know you can lift it up separately. And that's why I left the transmission mounted to the two pads. Now I can lift the engine up. Looks like we've got it. You can see that's what you have to get out of the center of the crankshaft here. And just keep an eye, more coolant might want to fall out. And now I'm going to get it in position to put on the stand, which is already configured for a 4T65 bolt pattern from Bad Grandpa. And it'll go on these mounts. All right, now we got the engine on the stand. Now I'm gonna pluck the old burnt up transmission off, set it on the ground so that I can put its replacement next to it and start swapping over all the parts. I'm gonna get this out, set it aside, then I'll have a nice GXP core. It's an HD transmission, so it's still got a good differential. It's got the slightly upgraded LS4 chain set that they started putting together when they put these things out. You can see this has definitely been replaced. It's got some either junkyard or reman markings on it with that 06 CEB. That's the call sign that's usually on the metal tag that is no longer attached to that stub. It's now got this tag, which I believe is just a part number for transmission. And I saw this as I was getting ready to pull everything out. The new one will go in stock form for now with just upgraded cooling and a shift kit. This one has most of a Transgo shift kit, the parts that go into the accumulator. I'm ordering the Sonax diff lube bracket just like I did in Bad Grandpa, and a fresh filter will go on here as well that I got. You can already see the hydraulic fluid from the inside of that leaking out, so I'm going to get a new one of those as well as the transmission one. I'm probably just going to get all three lower mounts. And the engine bay is clear. The cradle's back in there. I tucked the wiring harness back down for now. I will dig into that on a sunny day when I can just relume everything. And I'm going to degrease this whole engine cradle. I'm going to tuck this thing outside. All I got to do is sit with the jack at the front of it and turn the light on. Just gonna jack up the front of the cradle, take out those stands I have right now under the chassis, running under the unibody frame rails so that I can set it back on the ground. I hooked up the ball joints again and the steering tie rod ends to the knuckle so that I can steer it. I've been kind of vacuuming off and brushing off as much of the grime as possible before putting the fresh valve cover gaskets on, and then I will be doing the oil pan gasket as well. I'll take this front cover off after I get that water pump manifold off, and then I will be swapping this wobbly harmonic balancer. So that, I don't know if I showed a video of that, but it had about a 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch of play as it rotated, so it was definitely gone. It's a common failure on these engines as well. We will be swapping over all of the parts from here. As I mentioned, since a lot of people typically work on 3800s when they're dealing with either builds related to my channel or just 4T65s in general, or if this is your first time kind of seeing somebody dig through one of these, just wanted to show the layout of the mounts On the passenger side of the transmission at the differential output, it's got this large bracket here that mounts up to all 4 bolts there. That single bolt is the only one that goes directly in. And then it has this beefy, these are both aluminum brackets, so they're not super heavy, but they are pretty structurally sound. These 3 mount like that on there, and then they bolt up to this goofy little angled mount. And if I didn't mention it before, the dipstick tube has on the back of the transmission this little hold down. There's a tab on the dipstick tube, so it's very accessible from underneath the car. You'll see it up near the downpipe where the crossover is merging from the front to the rear. But as you can see, a lot of grime on this transmission. But I've got this one fairly cleaned up. I just went around it with a little bit of degreaser and a lot of scrubbing with a wire brush and just a little plastic brush just to get most of it cleaned off. I think I like it as is. I'm not gonna paint it. I'm not really gonna go hard scrubbing on it at all. It's just cleaned up. So now I'm gonna pick it up, drop the pan. Actually, I'm probably gonna pick this one up first so that I can transfer over my Transgo shift kit components. All right, so I pulled the shift kit. This is the Transgo shift kit. It also comes with a bunch of extra parts that go along with an overhaul, which I'm not doing right now. This reman trans is done. It's totally smoked. I've got a couple pictures, but thankfully the transmission I got at the junkyard looked great. The pan was super clean. It just had the OEM magnet, that little square guy usually sits in that tail. I pulled it out, wiped it around, threw all these magnets in there just for giggles. Hopefully it stays just as clean. There was just a little bit of pink fluid, very, very clean, that I drained out of there. And now I'm looking up underneath, and it looks almost brand new under here. So you can see a little bit of the fluid left up there, but very, very clean in here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this apart, see if anything ever did happen in there that is aftermarket, but then go ahead and put the Transgo stuff right there in according to the directions. Put the new filter in and put the pan back on. Unfortunately, won't be putting that LS2 lid on it just yet, but I will be putting the trans cooler on. For the trans cooler, I just threw some RTV on these end caps that kind of were just cheap little plastic covers for the fins to stay nice, and I didn't want those flopping around or falling off. So I just threw RTV on there. I was going to paint it, but I said, nah, don't worry about it. I'll finish cleaning out the trans cooler with some of this. That thing is about a half hour's work from being on the ground and ready to set onto the cradle. Then we'll drop this engine back on top of it. For now, a lot of stock stuff going back in. We got a stock transmission that's hopefully in good shape. Stock exhaust with just some thrush mufflers that somebody put on there before I bought the car. All the way up to the stock downpipe and cat with the stock exhaust manifolds. So, not much more than the factory 300 or so horsepower this thing came with, where all we're doing is making it rumble a little more, and we've got the K&N kit that's going right back up on it. And I'll probably tune it so that way I don't have to leave the oil pressure sender unplugged. I can plug that back in. It lets me have remote start again without the check engine light. Getting close to done here. Got the engine all back up in there. 95-ish% hooked back up, I started filling fluids. I started filling up the tranny fluid, forgetting that I'm still working on the trans cooler. So I've got just the temp mount. I'm routing the lines, figuring out exactly the pathway, because the GXPs have this big under air dam ducting panel, whatever. And those are fairly important for making sure airflow gets to your radiator and everything the right way. So I don't want to disturb that too much with a lot of cutting. So I'm figuring out exactly how I want to do it. I'm going to do AN fittings off of the bottom of the transmission going into the cooler. I've just got an inexpensive one here, so I'm running it in series with the factory radiator transmission cooler lines. So coming from the transmission into this cooler and then back out of the cooler to the radiator before it goes back to the transmission. So getting that plumbed up, and then we will top it off. The only things I've got left are putting the sway bar back on. You can see the end link there, sway bar sitting tucked against the wall. And then we will be done. My list has been crossed off and put back together a bunch of times, so I've got the catback exhaust, the downpipe's already on there, so just got to bolt the torque converter up as well. Time to try starting this thing. So let's see what happens. Got the door cracked for the exhaust. Coolant burped a little bit. Power steering's going to be a little mad. I'm going to refill it. I'm going to let it warm up, then I'll see how much tranny fluid I got to top off. It's alive!